You can't get much more classic than Shin Megami Tensei on the Super Famicom. Its release in 1992 marked a new beginning for the Megami Tensei franchise as the first game to make a clean break from its origins in the Digital Devil Story novel series. With its unique contemporary setting, dark atmosphere, iconic demon designs, unforgettable music, and innovative alignment and party-building systems, Shin Megami Tensei can be considered a fully realized version of the intriguing concepts that its two predecessors introduced. If the Digital Devil Story games are the roots of the franchise, then you can think of Shin Megami Tensei as the sapling that would grow into a towering tree with branches stretching in all directions. Plant metaphors aside, we're talking about some pretty influential shit. Countless games have seen inspiration from Shin Megami Tensei, and every day, new fans are finding themselves interested in the series, with its latest release just around the corner. Whether you're a longtime Megami Tensei fan interested in revisiting the classics, or you just found out about these games yesterday, you might be wondering, does the original Shin Megami Tensei hold up today? Is it really worth the time, or are the game's innovations bogged down by tedious mechanics and outdated gameplay? Considering how many ports Shin Megami Tensei has received across a wide variety of platforms, which version would be the best to start with? Well, we're going to try to answer all of those things as we take a deep dive into the origins of the beloved mainline Shin Megami Tensei series. The bulk of this video will be focused on an extended playthrough and discussion of the game's Super Famicom release. Afterwards, we'll explore its various ports, from the Sega CD to the PC Engine, and even the Game Boy Advance and iPhone. Feel free to check the description and skip ahead to what you're most interested in. Otherwise, settle in and get ready for one hell of a story. Turn the game on, press start, and you find yourself being pulled down a strange, hazy corridor. Suddenly, a gate slams shut in front of you, and a stern-looking face demands to hear your name. It explains that you have power lying dormant within you, and already, it's time to pick our character's stats. Let's check it out. Our available stats are Strength, Intelligence, Magic, Vitality, Speed, and Luck. Your standard stuff. As you might imagine, stats like Strength and Vitality affect things such as your attack power and HP, while Intelligence and Magic determine your ability to attack with and defend against spells, as well as your conversational prowess. Speed allows your character to act quicker and hit more often, and Luck can affect a handful of things, such as your character's chance to evade an attack or escape from battles. As is tradition with most Megami Tensei protagonists, using magic isn't going to be an option for us, so it's best to focus your points on strength, vitality, and speed. Every now and then you should toss a point or two towards intelligence if you want a better shot at gathering demons with less trial and error. Following a build like this will generally ensure you have minimal issues getting through the game. When you're done, you're told that beyond this door is a righteous man chosen by God to follow the path of law, as well as one who trusts his own inner power with a spirit of competition and chaos. It's up to us to navigate our own path through this world without leaning too closely to either of them. We'll see how that goes. As you're pulled into the next room, you're met with what is, in my opinion, one of the most surreal and impactful sequences in any game I've played. Far down the hallway, you see a cross spinning rapidly towards you, and as it plants itself on the ground in front of you, a crucified figure materializes onto it. You're told to call the figure's name to awaken him. This is our law hero. For people already used to Megami Tensei, this scene may not seem very significant, but I think it does an excellent job of portraying the scale and sinister tone of this adventure. This little sequence was actually one of my first exposures to the franchise, and I remember feeling totally mystified and intrigued by it. In the first 5 minutes, you're already well aware that this shit isn't going to be your usual fantasy RPG. So let's give this guy a name. I decided on Charlie to continue my tradition of honoring that guy who's constantly holding his balls in Shin Megami Tensei if. As for his stats, well, it's up to you. You can make a physical strength-based build if you want to, but I opted to start off with a handful of points in the magic-based skills. If you're the kind of person that likes min-maxing, you can definitely do that, but for everyone else, just about any build is viable enough. Finish up, and Charlie joins our party as we make our way further into the corridors. Next, we see a demon hunched over another figure who's been knocked to the ground. It explains that this is the soul of a weak man who seeks power, and so, we need to call out for him to wake him up. I decided to name our Chaos hero, Naoki. This is a backup name I often use when I'm playing games in Japanese, and I thought it sounded good enough. I know there's some names for these guys floating around out there in a manga or a novel or some shit, but I couldn't be asked to look those up. One of the best parts of playing these games is getting attached to your party because of the names you give them. Like the Law Hero, I gave this guy another magic-based build just for fun. So, with the squad decked out and ready to roll, we continue through a door and find a woman named Yuriko bathing in a small pond. She says she's been waiting for us as our eternal partner, and after stepping out of there and taking a few more steps, the voice of our mother interrupts everything and wakes us up. We reappear in our room in bed, likely drenched in piss after experiencing that acid trip of a nightmare. A message is waiting for us on our computer from a guy named Steven. He frantically explains that our world is in grave danger as ancient demons are reawakening to reclaim the Earth. Attached to the message is a download for the Demon Summoning Program, which will allow us to use the power of demons to fight, negotiate, and hopefully survive for longer than a few seconds once shit hits the fan. As one typically does when they receive an email from a crazy guy offering you a way to summon demons, we decide to hold on to it for later. Our nightmare and that strange message are definitely a lot to unpack, but it's nothing a good breath of fresh air won't solve. As we step out of our room, Mom explains that we slept through all the commotion last night. There's a huge police presence outside, and it seems like something serious is going down. Despite the fact that cops are everywhere and we've been promised a demonic apocalypse, some things never change, and Mom needs her coffee. So, she hands us our allowance for the month and sends us out to get some. Let's do this shit. On your way out of the house, don't forget to say hi to Pascal, your dog. Ignoring the fact that he has blue fur and red eyes, he's pretty cute, so be sure you don't miss it. Listening to him bark is probably the single most important moment in all of gaming, so really take it all in before you step outside, because you'll probably never find peace again after this. Ready? Okay. Outside, the town is ours to explore. You'll notice pretty quickly, however, that you can't go far. Most roads are blocked off by the police, and many of the buildings are locked up. Fortunately, the shopping center's still open, and there's a lot to see there. Inside, you've got a variety of shops to look at. Armor, weapons, and medicine are all immediately available for you to purchase. If you're feeling proactive, feel free to blow through your month's allowance on cheap equipment and drugs. You'll also find the cafe in here, where you start to get a feel for what's going on in town. It seems a female student from a nearby school has been killed and dismembered at Inogashira Park, and the police are out in force looking for the culprit. In addition to that, apparently, the director of the hospital is up to some shady experiments when the building closes for the night. As you talk to all the customers at the cafe, eventually you'll come across one sitting alone in the back of the place. It's Yuriko from our dream, who seems to taunt you as she mysteriously laughs about seeing you here. If it weren't for the massive shit our character just dropped in his pants, I'd imagine he'd be pretty intrigued by the possibility of his wet dreams becoming a reality. After you're satisfied gathering information in here, drop by the cash register and pick up the coffee. The owner of the place gives it to us to take home for free and says we can pay him later. Nice. Outside the cafe, there are a few more things we can check out. One is an antique store that sells some really expensive pieces of art. Now, you didn't hear it from me, but this guy actually deals firearms. We'll check that out later. You may also come across this gang of assorted punks, wanderers, and ne'er-do-wells hanging out in a room. They immediately tell you to get lost, so sure, who might argue? Now, the most important thing you're going to find here is this guy behind the drugstore. As you approach him, he seems really freaked out and threatens to attack you if you come any closer. Mere seconds after saying this, a fucking bloated purple monkey flies in and rips his throat out. You barely get a chance to react before it slams into you and runs away. Holy shit. Well, rather than tell the police, the owner of the store, or literally anyone what just happened, we decided to pick up the knife the guy was holding and head back home to deliver Mom's coffee. It's what a good son would do. After getting back, there's not much to do except sleep again. I know we've only been awake for like 10 minutes, but honestly, I'd probably do the same thing if I was having a day like this. As you might guess, we return to the dream world. Charlie and Naoki rejoin us, and this time, we run up on a group of guys preparing to sacrifice a woman to revive a demon king. You have the option of saving her, or not. This is your first instance of an alignment choice. No matter what you pick, the outcome's the same, but your attitude going into the choice will determine which way your alignment sways. As we interrupt the ceremony, we again must call out the name of this character. I opted to name her Ray. Feel free to assign her whatever stats you want, though I'd recommend you focus on magic and speed. As things calm down, she thanks us and explains that we're destined to be together soon, though we will be separated not long after. Then, we wake up in our room again. Yet again, we receive a message on our computer from Steven. He drops us a new file with the auto mapping program, which generates a map for us as we explore different locations. Not bad. Mom mentions that overnight she heard us calling out the name of a girl named Ray, who happens to live just next door to us. I think we should pay her a visit. Step outside and it quickly becomes clear that things have escalated a bit. Almost immediately, you're gonna get a demon encounter. Monsters and thugs are roaming the streets, but fortunately, we're equipped to deal with the situation. Let's take a look at the battle system. If you played other Megami Tensei games from this era, then you already know what to expect. If not, well, it's a simple yet effective system. When a demon appears, you can fight it, try to escape, attempt to negotiate with it, or set the battle to play out automatically. Choosing fight allows you to choose whether you're using a sword or gun attack, and if you've got spells, you can access those here too. Activating your computer allows you to summon and remove demons from your active party in combat, as well as rearrange your party order. Party order allows you to strategize by placing your heavy-hitting, high-powered characters in the front, where they'll take most of the damage, and placing your more fragile casters or range attackers in the back to have a higher chance of being ignored. Be sure you don't forget to consider your party order. Provided your positioning is good, you can blow through battles and rarely have to worry about reviving anyone. Aside from this, naturally, you can use items if you have any, and also defend to reduce your incoming damage. Demon negotiation is pretty self-explanatory. When you start a conversation, you can either choose to take a friendly or threatening attitude, and from there, you just see how the demon reacts and keep going. Try to cater to what you think a demon wants to hear, and keep in mind that many cannot be recruited no matter the circumstance. It's a good rule of thumb to at least attempt a conversation on each one to see if they're willing to talk. As I mentioned earlier, the higher your intelligence stat is, the easier these negotiations tend to go, though it's also totally possible to get through with good RNG. It's smart to keep your team stocked up whenever you can. You'll always be ready for combat, and you'll have plenty of candidates for demon fusion to strengthen your party later. This system is pretty solid on paper, though as you'll learn over the course of this video, there exists great potential to heavily exploit it. Naturally, it doesn't have any of the advanced mechanics from later entries in the series, but despite its simplicity, it can still be pretty fun. Combat's usually quick. Individual battles rarely last longer than 30 seconds or a minute at most. This is a good thing, because as you'll notice when you explore the city and the dungeons that follow, the encounter rate in this game can be ridiculous. Many times you'll be seeing encounter after encounter, step after step, and that shit can get pretty annoying if you're just trying to get to the end of a hallway or something. In these cases, you'll likely find yourself setting battles to auto instead of actually playing them, and that can definitely get repetitive. There are items and spells to alleviate the encounter rate, but I don't think the game would have suffered if they cut it back just a little bit. I'll elaborate more later on how battles can be made shockingly easy, quite literally, but for now, let's keep going. So, when we get to Ray's house, she seems pretty confused. She's just trying to go on a date with her boyfriend today, and she has no memory of any weird dreams. Huh. Well, there's not much else we can do here right now, so let's dip. Next up, let's check out that park where the student we learned about was supposedly murdered. Casually slash your way through several demons, and eventually, this old dude pops up on the street in front of you. He already knows who we are and gives us a little philosophical rant, just sitting there in the middle of the road. He asks us if we decide with law, chaos, or perhaps neither, and then warps us away to some kind of dungeon to test our strength. Listen, I did not consent to this. When we arrive, both Charlie and Naoki are there, still manifesting as strange figures, so it's clear that this is a forced dream of some sort. You don't have to worry about exploring this dungeon, because you quite literally get dragged through it. After a minute, your mother appears and seems really upset that you're here, but we get pulled past her and tossed into a room where a doctor is holding a ceremony of some kind. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? He transforms into a pretty intimidating looking demon, and after just a single turn of combat, one-shots the shit out of us. Don't even worry about a strategy for this fight, you can't win. So we get pulled out of the dream, and this fucking geezer's all like, well, I guess you're not strong enough yet. I mean, I'd like to see you get forced into an acid trip and see just how effective you are at demon combat. Anyway, the way past him's open now, and there's a building up ahead you can enter. It actually has some pretty important things in it, though we can't make much use of them yet. One is the Cathedral of Shadows, where once we have demons, we can fuse them together to make new ones. The other is a healer where we can revive our team and cure status effects. You know, this is kinda crazy if you think about it. The apocalypse hasn't even really happened yet, and yet here's this cultist looking ass guy talking about fusing demons in some building near the park. Like, is he just a groundskeeper in a Halloween costume or some shit? What are you doing? If anything, I guess this is a hint that things aren't going back to normal anytime soon. So, with nothing left to do, we head back home. Except this time, the law catches up to us. The police explain that we're under arrest for murder because our fingerprints were found at the shopping center where that guy got killed by a demon. This is like the most logical thing that happens in the game. What did you think was going to happen when you not only witnessed a murder and said nothing, but took the murder weapon and started swinging it around in the street? The protagonist of this game is either the biggest idiot in the world, or he just gives zero shits whatsoever. Afterwards, they throw us in jail, except this is a hospital. And you know what happens in the hospital, right? Yeah, that crazy-ass doctor is going to sacrifice us for his evil experiments. I'm pretty sure this falls under cruel and unusual punishment. Luckily, we've got a partner in crime to help us out of this. Sharing our cell is none other than Charlie, the law hero, in the flesh. He recognizes us from our dreams and explains that he was arrested after defending himself from demons while searching for his girlfriend Ray. Huh. Crazy how that all links up. A way out of our cell conveniently appears as a doctor comes in and says it's time for our surgery. Charlie charges into him and knocks him out, and from here, it's time for our first real dungeon of the game. The hospital is about as simple as you'd expect from a first level. There are only a couple of floors to navigate, and each are quite small. As you explore and fight demons, you're gonna level up pretty rapidly, so be sure you're making the most of your early stat boosts. My law hero with a magic build came in handy with powerful attacks, so don't forget to use your spells. Even though it's really early on, you can still get wiped out if you're a bit reckless. The biggest thing you want to do first in this dungeon is find Steven. He gives us a lore dump and explains that he invented the demon summoning program after being unable to communicate with the demon he encountered while working on a series of teleportation devices called the Terminal System, something which gravely wounded him. He explains that the program was sent out to a huge number of people to increase the chance that the demons can be kept under control. Also, the Terminal System has been taken over by a guy called Goutou, who is using the program to create his own demon army. Steven gives us a demon analyzing program, which functions as a way for us to view an enemy's stats and move list. Nice. Well, let's get the fuck out of here. Steven instructs us to get to the director's room on the second floor so we can flip a switch and escape through a locked door. Once you get there, it's time for a boss battle with the hospital director, who's actually a demon called Arias. Just go hard on this guy with as much attack power as you can. My strategy was to attack with physical attacks on the protagonist and magic with our law hero, with the protagonist using medicine on anyone that needed it. After a handful of turns putting out consistent damage, the boss goes down and we're home free. At this point, you're going to want to check out the mall again to get our next party member. Inside, you see that same gang of guys as before, with a dude named Ozawa threatening a guy on the floor. Charlie decides to step in, and the group quickly decides whatever they're doing isn't worth a fight. You know who this is. It's Naoki, the Chaos Hero, and the second guy from our dreams. Understandably, he's pretty pissed off about getting beaten up, and he decides to join up with us to fight back against Ozawa's gang and the demons. Alright, the whole squad's here. Feel free to stock up on anything while we're here, and stop by the cafe for some rumors. One guy mentions a strange abandoned building called the Echo Building that we might want to check out soon. For now, there's little else to do but head home. When we greet our mother, something seems wrong about her. She insists that we come closer to her, and our friends can tell that things aren't quite right. Sure enough, our mother turns out to be the demon who ate her, and we've got no choice but to fight. Shit. Well, Ama no Sakugami is a bit tougher than Arias, but not by much. Blast this thing with spells, keep your health topped off, and look out for its silence inflicting Makajam spell. This will prevent you from casting, though even if that happens, you'll probably be fine anyway if you just keep using physical attacks and medicine. When the fight's over and the dust settles, your friends awkwardly try to comfort you about what just happened. Famously, Charlie tells you to try not to feel too bad, after which Naoki essentially tells him to shut the hell up. Suddenly, Pascal starts barking at us, and we decide to bring him along with us because why not? Well, considering we've got no reason to go home ever again, I guess our next move is to check out that Echo Building and see if it's got anything to do with what's been going on. Usually it's locked up, but the demon we just beat happened to drop a key card, and that'll get us in there. Before you go, you might consider doing a few things to prepare. First, remember the antique store? It turns out, like I said, this guy isn't actually an art dealer or anything like that. He just wants to sell you an MP5 submachine gun. If you can afford it, try to get a gun for your character here. While Charlie and Naoki do join your party with guns of their own, it can be useful to have one on every human party member. Machine guns tend to be the best because they target entire groups of enemies at once, though there are plenty of great single-shot weapons that pack a punch too. The coolest thing about the firearms in this game is that they don't actually use ammo. You have to purchase the item called bullets and equip it, but once you do that, you got infinite shots. You can swap these normal bullets out for different kinds that inflict status effects, such as charming an enemy. And yes, considering there is no limit to how many times these can be fired, it can be as overpowered as it sounds, even against bosses. Keep it in mind. Another thing we can do is gather some demons for fusion. It wouldn't hurt to have some extra help in our party for what's to come, right? Once you've recruited something, head back to the Cathedral of Shadows we found earlier and see what you can fuse. Like right here, see? We got a pixie and, our dog. Yeah, you can fuse your fucking dog with a demon. It feels kinda bad to see him get melted down into demon goo, but he returns buff as hell and with the ability to speak English. This is Cerberus. He's far above our level, and typically you'd never be allowed to fuse something with such a high level this early, but I guess Pascal was built different, and we're able to anyway. He costs over $1,000 to summon into your active party, but once he's there, the next part of the game becomes a complete joke. Now, you don't have to fuse away your precious dog, and I can see why you might not want to do that, but trust me, it's a good idea. So, with a brand new gun and a demonic dog by our side, it's time to go on a little trip to the Echo Building. Who said video games were a bad influence? The Echo Building is right below the Kichijoji Mall area. Though it's 5 floors, it's extremely simple. You actually have the choice of taking an elevator all the way to the top and bypassing literally everything, though I recommend fighting your way through it and taking the stairs to pick up some treasure along the way. You can find a handful of incense items in this place that will increase your stats, and they're very easy to locate, so it's worth checking out. If you haven't already, when you get to the 5th floor, you may want to summon Cerberus. Yuriko appears and notices that we're determined to continue forward. She admits that we're powerful enough to do anything we set our mind to, and moves out of the way. Head into the room behind her marked Terminal, and a familiar scene plays out. A doctor is starting a strange ceremony, and as revenge for interrupting, he transforms into the demon Domon. Let's show this little shitter a proper rematch. Surprisingly, he has a pretty big pool of health. It's nearly 400 points worth. If you're just rolling with your friends, it can potentially be a long battle. This is where Cerberus comes in. His basic attacks do over 100 damage per hit, meaning you can end this whole thing in 3 or 4 turns. The only thing Domon can do to throw a wrench in your plan is to get lucky with the spell Shibabu, which can bind your team. He actually happened to bind Cerberus, meaning he was as good as useless for several turns. This can be fixed with a spell or an item, but if other members of your team get binded too, then it's entirely possible that you'll just have to wait it out, and that can be deadly. Luckily, as soon as the effect wore off, I was able to quickly attack with Cerberus and finish this guy off for good. When he goes down, you notice a computer in the back. Cerberus starts to growl at it, and then he attacks it, but it warps him away. And well, he's gone. Shit. Guess it was nice having him while it lasted. Well, these are the terminals that Steven was talking about earlier. Teleportation devices that can take us to different points we unlock around the city. For now, the only place we can warp to is a lab, so let's head in and see what's going on. Predictably, it's crawling with demons. One guy who was apparently an employee of the lab that got turned into a zombie explains that the building was rushed and taken over by demons. Outside, we run into an orc who thinks we're fresh demons from the abyss, but quickly realizes that our human skin isn't a costume and attacks us. He goes down in just a few hits, but at this point, it's pretty clear that the invasion's in full swing. You can also find Steven in this building, who asks what we think of his demon summoning program, and even offers to increase its storage capacity so we can recruit additional party members. What a guy. Aside from a few more scattered items, there isn't much else to do in the lab. Go outside, however, and we're in a fresh area of the city. The boundaries blocking our way to the south have advanced from police officers to soldiers, and they explain that martial law is in place now. To the north stretches a pretty expansive new zone on the map, with a handful of buildings and branching paths to explore. Walking down these residential streets still feels a little peaceful, even though the world's absolutely going to hell. I think that's one of the things I like most about the first chunk of this game. The atmosphere is something really unique that I haven't found in any other game. As mysterious and downright disturbing as this game can be, it feels equally as relaxing and kinda carefree, creating a very surreal feeling. The invasion never quite feels like something that's out of your hands either. You and your friends have little trouble taking out every demon you encounter, though you can tell that things are continuing to rise to a boiling point, and the worst is yet to come. The amount of paths might be a little confusing, but eventually you'll find your way to the Shinjuku underground. This is our next hub area. Consider it the Kichijoji Mall on steroids. It's much bigger, with many more shops, a Cathedral of Shadows, and a handful of bars and healing areas. The bars are your best source of information, and there are 3 to choose from, each representing a different alignment. The Chaos Aligned bar is filled with Japanese soldiers who serve Goutou, the guy Steven mentioned earlier. Apparently, he's trying to take control of the invading demons in order to fight off the invading American army, who were sent to wipe out the invasion entirely. Goutou believes that he can use demonic power to make Japan a better place and halt the tyrannical state that the Americans are trying to set up in Tokyo. Strangely, as I was leaving this bar, Jack fucking Frost popped up in the middle of it and tried to murder me in front of everyone. I think that's pretty ballsy of him to try and humiliate me publicly like that, but I appreciate his attempt at keeping things interesting. Next up, we've got the Law-Aligned bar, which is filled with American soldiers who humorously speak with very poor grammar to reflect their relative lack of skill with the Japanese language. They're being led by the American ambassador Thorman, and yes, his name is Thorman. I really wondered who that might imply he is. Finally, we've got the Neutral bar, where members of the Resistance hang out. The Resistance is led by a woman called Rei. Interestingly, a different Rei than our next door neighbor. We'll talk a bit more about that pretty soon. The Resistance is working to keep the conflict between Goutou and Thorman from getting too severe, so they run sabotage missions against each side. Essentially, they're just trying to look after the people of Tokyo with no thirst for order or power, and are clearly the most rational of the bunch. If you talk to the bartender here, he'll give you a little quiz about working with demons and relying on higher powers. If you disagree with each of his alignment-based questions, he'll hand you a bar matchbook that we can use downstairs to meet more members of the Resistance. Before we head downstairs to meet up with the Resistance, be sure you find the terminal in here, because you can use this to jump back to Kichijoji if you ever need to. Also, in addition to alignment-focused bars, there are also different healers that correspond to each alignment. Using a law-aligned healer, for example, will have your alignment tip slightly towards law, and it favors law-aligned demons. If you're looking for a specific ending, keep these in mind. Downstairs, you run into a guy who's protecting an off-limits area. Show him the bar matchbook and we're allowed past, where we meet Rei, the leader of the Resistance. She remembers all 3 of us from our dreams, meaning the other Rei, Charlie's girlfriend, happened to be the wrong one the entire time. She asks us for our help in de-escalating the conflict between Japan and America, and also to go on a mission to rescue other girls named Rei that have been kidnapped for the purposes of finding this one and destroying the Resistance. Both Charlie and Naoki are excited for their own reasons. Charlie can find his girlfriend, and Naoki can get back at Ozawa's gang, who seem to be helping Goutou carry out his dirty work. Everything sounds all peachy fucking perfect until Yuriko warps in, grabs Rei, and immediately escapes. Oops. Guess we led Yuriko straight to her. Well, all that other shit has to wait. We gotta go track Rei down before it's too late. You might be wondering, where did they go? Well, you can find a tip if you walk all the way back to the Neutral bar. A guy says that she's scheduled to be executed at the Tokyo government office. Still kinda cryptic, and I feel like it's unlikely that someone would walk all the way back here to find that, but whatever. If you don't find it by process of elimination, first, it's this semi-important looking building to the west of the Shinjuku underground. It can help to have some demons before you head in here. Be sure you're fully healed too. We're gonna have ourselves a marathon boss fight. Inside, a soldier guards the execution room. We initially enter as spectators to avoid being detected, but as Yuriko explains to the massive audience why Rei deserves to be killed for her crimes against Goutou, she quickly notices us and spoils the whole thing, and summons a horde of enemies to take care of us. Let's do it. The first round is against 8 zombie cops who are vulnerable to fire. If you're running a magic build on the Chaos Hero, his group targeting fire spells will make short work of him. You can also bring along Pyro Jack for some extra help. Without the use of these spells, I imagine the fight's significantly tougher, because you're going to have to deal with being hit several times per turn if you don't bring them down fast enough. After you finish these guys off, you have to face 8 zombie soldiers. Again, fire spells are the answer to this problem. They can definitely pack in the damage if you get hit by 4 or 5 of these guys in a single turn. Round 3 is against more soldiers as well as a group of spirit demons, and round 4 is against more spirits and a couple of ghouls. Throw out your best magic. Fire continues to work, as do Zan spells. If you've been boosting strength on your protagonist, it can be a good idea to use them to wipe out the ghouls since there are only 2 of them. Make it through all of this, and Yuriko finally gives up, leaving you to rescue Rei. She expresses her gratitude for your help and decides to head back to the bar since the resistance base is no longer a good place to hide. I feel like the bar is even worse, but hey, I'm not the one calling the shots here. Before heading back to meet up with her again, there's one more thing we can do outside. To the north of the Tokyo government office is a smaller building where Ozawa is hiding. This isn't required, and you aren't explicitly told to do it, but it's pretty neat and offers you a chance to get some additional XP. Essentially, we find him lurking in one of the back rooms, and Naoki's eager to get back at him. Ozawa mocks us and does his villain thing, and then reveals that he doesn't care about Goutou or the resistance at all. He just wants power. Then he summons a skeleton for us to fight and leaves. This guy's pretty simple, just beat him up for a few turns. He did manage to one-shot my Pyrojack with an attack that did over 100 damage, and that shit was pretty scary, but fortunately, none of my human party members were hurt. Just be aware that he can do some pretty heavy damage, and try to knock him out as fast as you can. Like I mentioned, all you get for this is just a bit of experience, but it's a neat little side mission, and you might as well do it since you're so close. Back at the bar, Rei again thanks us for saving her life and ensuring that Tokyo has some hope for the future. She explains that the Rei Charlie is looking for is being held somewhere in the Ichigaya area, and she tells Naoki that an attack on Ozawa's men is being coordinated as we speak. Unfortunately, at this point, each of our friends leave the party to pursue these goals, but no worries. Rei decides to join us for a particularly important mission. To figure out how to solve this conflict, we're going to personally meet with the leaders of the Japanese and American armies. Hopefully, we'll be able to work out some kind of agreement between them and end things peacefully. Rei hands us an ID card that will grant access to each of their bases, and we're off. Be sure you're prepared before moving forward. It might sound like a pain in the ass, but I recommend revisiting Kichijoji to buy yourself an MP5 if you haven't already. Rei joins your party with one, so having 2 powerful guns to blast through demons with will really speed things along. If you check your character's inventories, you may even notice that Rei is carrying nerve bullets, which are capable of putting enemies to sleep. These are incredibly useful, and I encourage you to blast the hell out of anything that comes your way with them. As I mentioned earlier, these things work on bosses too, meaning you can repeatedly put even the toughest demons to sleep and beat the shit out of them provided they aren't immune to bullet damage. I really can't understate how powerful these bullets can be. You're easily capable of taking on groups of 8 demons at once, because usually at least half of them are going to be put to sleep on the first round. Once you're all fitted out, it's time to pay a visit to Goutou. His headquarters can be found just east of the entrances to the Shinjuku Underground, in an area surrounded by trees. Some soldiers stop you at the door, but thankfully our ID card works and we're allowed in. Overall, this is another simple dungeon, and it's yet another where you can just take an elevator to the top and skip everything. There's some money and incense you can find if you take a look around each floor, as always, and you might want to try and recruit some of the enemies lurking here. In addition to demons, you can also encounter Gaian suicide squads roaming the building. For shits and giggles, I decided to try and negotiate with one, and my jaw hit the floor when not only did one join my party, but his name was simply abbreviated to the word suicide. If this isn't an iconic crew, I don't know what is. When you reach Gotou's room, he explains that Rei nearly being executed wasn't his idea. Yuriko was the one who decided to go that far. He says that he's mostly been ignoring the resistance as he has bigger problems to deal with. Apparently, the Americans are working under the direct orders of God to establish the 1,000-year kingdom for those who worship him. According to Goutou, anyone that won't comply with the Americans' plan will be killed, and even as we speak, Tokyo is under threat of nuclear annihilation. He asks for our help in undoing this plan, and it's up to you whether or not you believe everything he says. Before we're allowed to give him our final decision, we have to go hear the American side of the story. If Gotou's plan sounds pretty reasonable, there's something else in this building that might change your mind. As you explore, you'll eventually come across stairs that lead to a basement. In the basement are several cells which house a handful of innocent people named Rei that were kidnapped to find the resistance leader. Some of these prisoners are clearly quite young, but thankfully we can set them free. For a guy that said he doesn't care about the resistance that much, it seems pretty damn suspicious to have school children imprisoned downstairs. Well, let's see what our all-American friend Thorman has to say about it all. You can find the entrance to his base to the south of Gouto's. We enter a tunnel that leads up into a rather lavish-looking building with a red carpet inside. You're likely to run into some pretty sizable groups of enemies in here. Be sure to make the most of your guns and cast Zeo spells with Ray. Lightning spells in this game are another thing that are very broken. Provided you can cast the spell before any of the enemies have a chance to move, it's entirely possible to keep them stunned for the entirety of a battle. I'm going to show you a pretty ridiculous example of this in just a few minutes. When we reach Thorman, he apologizes for his bad Japanese and then explains that his forces are here to save everyone from the demons. It seems part of Gouto's plan is to summon Lucifer to Tokyo along with a new horde of demons, something which is sure to destroy Japan. Thorman admits that his men are not equipped to fight demons and encourages us to help him defeat Goutou. He asks if you'll accept his offer. Depending on what you say here, naturally you'll be tilted towards the law alignment. I decided to reject Thorman's offer to fight for him, but I also ensured to him that I wasn't on Gotou's side either. Each of these guys seem to mean well in their own ways, but beneath what they're telling us, it's clear there's some ulterior motives. Well, we sure didn't accomplish much by doing this, so we might as well go back to Goutou and see if he's got anything else for us. If you're not sold on his plan, you might want to make some preparations before going. Get yourself a bigger party, fuse some demons, and fully heal your team. When we get back, sure enough, he's awaiting our official response. If you agree with him, then you can skip what's about to come next and return to Thorman again. But fuck that, this guy's not going to do anything to save the city. As you might imagine, Goutou isn't the type to take our rejection lightly, and he sends out a couple of groups of demons to take care of us. Blast these guys with your best magic. If you have Pyrojack, a single cast of his powerful fire spell can be enough to kill some of them outright. This is just a warm-up round, so it's nothing much to worry about. The second group is slightly harder because you got Baycock the skeleton who can still hit like a truck. Fortunately, his health isn't very high, so as long as you prioritize him, you should be fine. After getting through this, finally Goutou comes out to fight. He's not super dangerous, though like Domon from the Echo building, if you get unlucky and have your entire team binded by Shibubu, he can basically just beat on you until you're dead. One of his moves is just to hit you with a critical hit, which can do around 50 damage, so keep an eye out on your weaker demons. A few turns worth of magic and guns should bring him down, provided you don't get stuck curing status effects and healing. As he dies, he says that we've made a huge mistake, and that there will be consequences for this. Well, I guess that's one less thing the Resistance has to worry about. When we get back to Thorman, he does something completely unexpected. He transforms into Thor. Nice. He congratulates us for killing Goutou, and thanks you on behalf of God himself, and asks if we'll continue to fight in his name. Well, see, about that. We really can't. I mean, considering the 1,000-year kingdom they're trying to set up is specifically oriented around the Abrahamic god, and well, we're in fucking Japan, it seems like a thinly veiled excuse to kill everyone. It looks like we're not going to be able to solve this problem with words, so we have to challenge Thor next. Of course, you're free to agree with him, but that might not be as good of an idea as you think. And let's check it out. So, Thor has a pretty glaring weakness that you can easily exploit to bring him down. It's almost embarrassing. As a deity associated with thunder and lightning, you might expect those sorts of attacks to be useless against him. But no, you can throw lightning spells at Thor and stunlock him for the entire fight. It's really easy, and it's likely that he won't get in a single shot at you. Now, this works on a lot of bosses, but I don't know, come on, they really couldn't have adjusted it for the one guy whose entire identity is based around lightning? Shit. If you decide not to stun him, he's essentially a slightly tougher version of Goutou. His attacks do a bit more damage, and he's capable of binding your party. If you could beat Goutou legitimately before, you're probably fine on this guy. Just use your usual strategies and take care to cure any status effects as soon as you get them. When Thor's finished, he throws out one final attack to stop you, a series of nuclear warheads. Yeah, seriously. With his dying breaths, he decides to destroy the entire city. Even if you choose to side with him, he does this anyway, so honestly, I don't see much of a point in sucking up to a guy who's cool with vaporizing you. A 30-second timer starts up in the center of the screen, and nothing you do can stop it. Literally the only thing you can do is try to run for the door, but it's nukes, that's not going to save your ass. If you can make it back to the tunnel before the time runs out, a soldier will ask you why you look so upset. Alright, who's gonna tell him? Right as the bombs drop, Ray decides to use the last of her power to teleport us out of here so at least one of us survives. I guess you could say our attempt at international negotiations didn't quite work out. At least we had some fun along the way. We wake up in a strange place in front of a guy who calls himself En no Ozono. He explains that 2 others have arrived here and that before he'll tell us anything, we should go find them first. If we need anything, his 2 demon assistants, Zenki and Goki, are in nearby rooms to help us. Well, holy shit, I didn't realize we had a celebrity on our hands. Yeah, it's that baby from a 1980s Japanese tissue commercial that was rumored to carry a curse that killed everyone involved with it. What a coincidence. Quickly you're gonna notice, this place is a bit of a maze. Definitely more complicated than anything we've seen thus far, but not unmanageable. The whole dungeon is essentially a series of circles, and we start out at the center. For now, make it your first priority to explore the rooms near you. As you can see, our demons have left us. We're totally alone right now. It's a great idea to quickly save, because if you get a shitty encounter, it's totally possible that you'll be unable to keep up the damage to make it through. The demons we had on our team are still alive, but we've got to find them first. They're kinda just chilling out in different rooms spread across the dungeon. Thankfully, they aren't too hard to find as long as you're thorough. Eventually, you'll come across Charlie and Naoki, and then it's time to head back to our boy En no Ozono and see what's going on here. With the gang all here, he explains that we're in the Kongokai, a place comparable to the afterlife. Tokyo's destruction was apparently just the beginning, and much of the world has erupted into nuclear warfare. Humanity is still scraping by, but needless to say, things are pretty bad right now. En no Ozono explains that we can go back to our world if we really want to, but first, he wants us to get him a drink of water from a nearby spring. Really? Coffee? Water? I mean, do I look like a delivery boy? Besides, this place is crawling with demons, yet it's his house. Whatever. The spring is kind of an annoying spot. You've got to go to the outer circle of the dungeon and then travel through a one-way door. Once you go through, that means you can't just turn around and go back. You've got to complete the entire circle and loop back. I know I said the encounter rate was high before, but here it really feels ridiculous. Like the guy who was setting the percentage fell asleep on his keyboard and added a few extra zeros. It was like every 2 steps for me, and the place isn't exactly small. Once you finally get there and trudge all the way back, this motherfucking guy chugs it down and asks you for another drink of water. You know, I really resent that. So loop all the way back around again to the spring, give it to him, and what does he say? That he doesn't actually want it and we can just keep it. First of all, suck my nuts. If you knew you weren't thirsty, why even ask? Like, you know he's flipping us off behind his back. Now, En no Ozono wants the team to split up and perform some other tasks for him. Charlie and Naoki get sent off on their own, and our job is to kill 2 phantasms that are lurking in the dungeon. One's red, the other's blue. They aren't anything to worry about, and if you're Law or Chaos aligned, then one of them will give you a weapon and you can just skip the fight. If you're neutral, you still get the weapons, but you have to fight both. The only challenge here is having a smaller team, but if you recruit some nearby demons, especially ones with ice or electric spells to stun the ghosts, you'll be fine. When all's said and done, En no Ozono finally says we're ready to leave, and the last part of the dungeon becomes accessible. Before heading there, be sure you're all healed up, and maybe fuse a couple demons. We're about to be entering a significantly more dangerous environment, and it's best to be as prepared as possible. If you've been grabbing demons from Shinjuku and here in the Kongokai, you may be able to fuse Mamanofu, who is quite useful with a decent physical attack as well as buff and debuff spells. Our final obstacle is a quick boss fight with Zenki and Goki, who want to test us before we leave. Well, let's do it. I think it's best to target Goki first, since he can cast Medea, which heals both of them. Zenki's a bit stronger physically and he can hit harder, but that healing is a real pain in the ass to watch and it just prolongs the fight. Your human party members might be of less use to you for this fight, just because during the time that we didn't see them after exploring with Ray, they don't seem to have leveled up very much, if at all. When the demons go down, you'll probably get several level ups for each, which brings them up to speed with you. Then, En no Ozono sends us back and warns us that things are probably going to be worse than we think. Sure enough, we land back in the city, and well, everything's destroyed. Take just a couple steps forward and a hooded man starts bugging us for money, only to get pissed off when he realizes we're carrying yen. That shit doesn't even exist anymore. The new currency is Maka. So we lose all of our worthless money, and then we're left to wander the wasteland broke as fuck. Things only get worse when we start hearing a woman's voice call our name, even though there's nobody around. I'll give you 3 guesses as to who that might be. Let's see if we can track her down. To the west, you can find an entrance to a building in Shibuya, which has a little shop in it, as well as a terminal where we can save our game and teleport around. You can use this to go back to Shinjuku, but let's poke around here for a minute first. You'll notice that this building is populated by a group known as the Messians, who naturally worship the very same Abrahamic god that Thor was talking about earlier. Negotiating with them in random encounters is possible, though they constantly ask you for donations to the church, which can be hard to oblige considering we just lost all of our money. Upstairs, after passing through a room in which you can't see anything and have to navigate using the map, you'll find an old man who mentions hearing of a person called the Psycho Diver in Shinjuku who can enter other people's minds. Just a bit further and you'll find a paralyzed woman chained up in a cell. One of the worshippers laments the fact that this woman, apparently their messiah, has been cursed. Since she can't speak to us directly, it makes some sense that she's managing to communicate through her mind, hence why we keep hearing her voice. Looks like Shinjuku is our next stop if we want to get into this girl's head. There's been some changes here, but fortunately the map layout's still the same, and your map doesn't get reset. As always, the bars and disco club are great places to gather information. Surprisingly, what we learn is that Ozawa has taken control of the city and has his own squad of private police pushing everyone around. Most people kinda hate it, but they prefer to being devoured by demons outside. If you haven't picked up on it already, you'll also quickly realize that a few years have passed since the bombs drops, and we were in Kongokai for a good while. Also a quick tip. In one of the bars there's a guy who will exchange your worthless yen bills for maka since he's a collector of old currency. This is a solid way to get a decent chunk of cash for doing nothing, so be sure you track him down. So far, we've got nothing on where the Psycho Diver might be. You kinda just have to explore to find this guy. If you go back down to the basement where we originally met Ray, you'll find that the area is now a cell, and that he's being imprisoned here and forced to use his psychic power as a weapon against anyone that bothers Ozawa. That's a bit of a pickle, but there is a solution to the problem. We can just take out Ozawa. You can find a staircase on the southwestern part of the first floor that leads up into a smaller area with a series of rooms, one of which is Ozawa's office. The dude's aged a bit, he's got white hair now, but sure enough, it's him. Despite Naoki directly calling him out for being a weak piece of shit who bullies people, he doesn't seem to recognize us, only saying that we sort of resemble a group he used to deal with back in the old days. To be fair, I guess a lot has changed. After Ozawa goes into a little speech about how it's a dog-eat-dog world and he offers the people protection, he decides to summon in a powerful demon to beat our asses. This is Take Minakata, and he's about to take your ass to lunch. In just one turn, he halves your HP and the fight ends. The group runs outside, and Naoki says that we aren't going to get this shit done unless he has more power. His grand plan is to fuse himself at the Cathedral of Shadows with the demon so he can pull off this takeover. Charlie gets pretty freaked out and asks Naoki how he could be okay with sacrificing his humanity just to kill someone, but he won't listen, and the only way to progress is to head over to the cathedral and complete the fusion. When you get there, Naoki chooses one of your demons at random to fuse himself with. What the fuck, dude? You literally didn't even ask. Naturally, he decided to use Mamanofu, who was my favorite and most used demon at the time. What a bunch of shit. On the bright side, I was able to fuse another one immediately after, and Naoki's stats go through the roof. On the second try, Take Minakata is much easier, and you even get a full free turn to attack him, so just use your new moves and he'll go down pretty fast. With his bodyguard out of the way, Ozawa's a sitting duck, and now, his life is in our hands. You're presented with the choice to kill him, but no matter what you pick, the Chaos Hero does it for you, so it's more just a judge of your personality. Afterwards, Naoki decides to leave our party, since at this point we're just baggage to him. With his newly fused form, there's no way we can possibly keep up, and he doesn't want to hang around with softies like us who might hesitate when they have to kill someone. Well, he's not quite that mean about it, but that's basically what he meant. Don't worry, we'll see him again later. So, it's just down to me and Charlie, grabbing our nuts in post-apocalyptic Tokyo. Let's head back to the Psycho Diver and let his ass out of jail. He's glad to hear that he no longer has to destroy people's minds as a way of life, and decides to do us a favor and help out the paralyzed girl back in Shibuya. When everyone arrives, he says that this girl got the devil in her, or something like that. We gotta go in her brain and get rid of whatever evil energy is lashed onto her spirit. I'll be honest, I kinda hated this place. It's not a bad dungeon at all in terms of design, it's another proper maze similar to the Kongokai, It's just that the encounter rate is so tedious. You better hope you got someone with the Estoma spell, or it's going to be a frustrating journey. Most of the demons aren't even that tough in here, but the endless repetition of encounter after encounter really starts to wear on you. These little fuckers right here suck though. They can use Shibuya to bind your entire party, which just holds you up even longer. As you make your way through, you'll encounter different cutscenes with memories of this girl's life, who, as you may have guessed, is obviously Rei. There's one where she's sitting in front of what looks like a nun as she's told that she was born to be this world's messiah, and that definitely sheds some light on how important our role is in the story, considering we're linked together by fate. The color of the dungeon also changes as you get deeper, though the encounters never relent. Finally, at the very end, you'll fight the demon who's cursing Rei, Arachne. She's got some power, so you'll definitely want to keep her frozen if you can. Try to recruit a Lilim if you can find one back in Shibuya, since she comes with the ice spell Bufala. Yoxani is also a good choice, boasting high HP and attack power. Arachne can charm your team, which means they'll start acting up and beating each other, but a good way to avoid this is just to set the afflicted party member to defend. If you do this, they'll just chill until it wears off. When you finally bring Arachne down, you need to walk all the way back to the start of the dungeon so the Psycho Diver can take us back home. Luckily, thank God, the encounters for the area are disabled, so at least it's a peaceful little stroll. Back in the cell, Rei again thanks us for saving her. I hope she's not getting too used to this. She says that our destinies are intertwined and she'll follow us wherever we go. We also learn that Rei had apparently died when the bombs hit, and that she was reborn with no memory of anything except us. Hopefully we can uncover a bit more about what exactly we're supposed to be doing together before long. So, where to next? Well, some citizens in Shinjuku tell you about a settlement called Roppongi that might be worth checking out, so that seems as good an option as any. You can find the place by heading east of Shinjuku, and that little area we first arrived in with all the trees. During my very first playthrough of this game, I actually came here before Shibuya and Shinjuku, but there's not much doing it before you rescue Rei. As you can see, it's got some kind of barrier surrounding it. At first glance, it may seem like there's no way inside, but it's as easy as walking into this little building over here, passing through a tunnel, and coming out inside the city. This place is weird. There are no encounters at all. That barrier outside really works, and it keeps all the demons out. Many parts of the city are just empty, so the whole thing feels pretty eerie. You'll definitely want to find the disco club, which happens to be populated. Inside, a woman says that they're keeping a girl named Rei who's been possessed by a demon locked up nearby. Sure enough, in the back of the club you can find her. It's Charlie's old girlfriend who's, well, dead. She's a reanimated corpse, and it turns out this entire town is populated by nothing but reanimated corpses who are kept alive by two leaders, the Red Baron and the Black Baron. They locked this Rei up because unlike all the other undead, she kept her memories from her past life. So she's just stuck here forever, unable to die or do anything. Rei begs us to bring her a soul incense so she can pass on to the next life, and that's it. Charlie doesn't even have much of a reaction beyond being upset that he couldn't save her, and says nothing else after we leave the room. This whole thing is actually optional. Save her if you want, it's a nice thing to do, but nobody's holding you to it. I think it'd be a good idea to learn more about these barons, so let's see what we can find. Upstairs, if you explore thoroughly, you'll run into a girl named Alice. She asks if you like the town so far, and tells us it was built specifically for her by the two barons. She says we should meet the Red Baron next. You can find him on the 3rd floor of this place. Head up, and Alice orders the secretary to let us into the Red Baron's office. Well, he seems like a nice guy. He says that this town was made so that Alice could live freely without worrying about demons. Basically, all he and the Black Baron want is for the kid to be happy. How nice. After our little chat, Alice asks us if we can give her a Hiranya. These are just like little MP restorative items you can find in stores. If you have one, just give it to her, and if you don't, well, tough shit. Now you have to warp back to Shinjuku, grab one from the shop, and run all the way back up here. Let's hope you happen to buy one at a store earlier. Unfortunately, that's not all Alice wants. Her next request is for us to die for her. That's a pretty steep escalation from her previous one. Obviously we can't do that, and she sits on the floor and starts crying. What a little shit. I literally just bent reality so I could warp across the city to buy her whatever this is, and this is what happens. Naturally, our good buddy the Red Baron isn't too happy about the situation, and transforms into Belial, who is immune to all forms of damage. After a few turns flailing around like an idiot, your party collectively decides to get the hell out of there, and we decide to walk out of the office like nothing ever happened. So what the shit do we do now? Well, there is one way we can defeat Belial, and as with all important things, it can be found in the basement. Head down to the very bottom of the city, suffer through random sections of the floor that damage and poison you, and you can find an item called a gushing jar. Now, I'm not even going to ask what's making this thing gush, but what's important is that we can use it to seal away Belial. If you feel like you need a little extra boost before challenging him again, be sure you check out the second floor for a speed incense. It's not much, but since these are the equivalent of a free level up, I think it's always worth taking the extra steps to pick them up. Especially here, where right now, there aren't even any encounters to deal with. So, back at the Red Baron's office, we open up our gushing piss jar, and Belial immediately gets sucked into it. Alice is heartbroken, but I don't really give a shit. Then, Yuriko appears and asks us for the sealed jar. This is yet another choice where no matter what happens, she takes it, but I decided to give it to her. Sure, she's probably going to use it to try and kill us again later, but fuck it. I just want to wash my hands of this whole thing and get the hell out of here. On our way out, the Black Baron suddenly appears and says we've crushed a little girl's dreams. He says Alice was given eternal life so she could be happy forever, but as Charlie points out, considering everyone else in the city's a reanimated corpse, it's not like the two Barons are completely innocent either. I mean, sure, these people are alive, but in Ray's case, she's just stuck there for all of eternity. As for the others, well, being mindlessly trapped in Roppongi forever to make some random girl happy doesn't exactly sound like a vacation either. As revenge, he reaches out to grab us and take our lives, but Charlie jumps in front of us to take the hit. Unfortunately, he's knocked out, and the Black Baron says that Charlie's soul now belongs to him. Shit. As you bust out of the office and decide to head towards the stairs, you'll probably make it about 3 steps before the encounters start again. Looks like the Black Baron means business. It was nice while it lasted. Blast through the encounters, make your way back to the basement, and be sure you're as healthy as possible when you get there. To avoid wasting Ray's magic, it can help to have a demon with a spell that can heal poison. You may also just want to swing by a shop and buy some poison curing items. Unless you're really careful and make a note of where the poison tiles are, you'll likely get snagged by it at least once, so it's something to consider. Sometimes winning a fight really can come down to just a few MP points, especially this one coming up. When you track down the Black Baron, he says that Charlie can't be saved. He's dead, his body is gone, we're too late. Then he transforms into Nebiros, and it's time for a fight. This guy has one annoying gimmick to look out for. He's capable of killing you instantly. Whenever he casts the spell Mudo, whoever gets hit by it has a pretty decent chance of just dying outright. Nebiros also has the usual physical and multi-hit damage spells, but they aren't quite as concerning as Mudo. As I've said for basically every boss, there's a great strategy here. Use lightning spells. Is it cheap? Yeah, but so is being randomly one-shotted. Honestly, Zio spells have to be the biggest problem with this game. I know I said the encounter rate was bad, but this has to be worse. Being able to stun lock nearly every boss throws a wet blanket on any tension that could result from fighting them. And having to consciously not use this spell to make fights even more engaging is just bad design. Oh well. Either shock him repeatedly, or be ready to revive party members and redo parts of the dungeon if you get nailed by Mudo. When Nebiros is finished, he asks you if what he was doing was really so bad. Yeah, it was. Using the souls of townspeople to power an illusory post-apocalyptic purgatory isn't very high on my list of good deeds. Then we see Charlie's ghost. He's, like, actually dead. I hate to say it, but his death is so sudden and anticlimactic that I just didn't really care. I mean, he's a cool guy, I'd rather he not die, but you know, there's only so much emotion that can be expressed when some cartoony-ass hands grab the dude, and then he reappears as a little spirit. Charlie thanks us for rescuing his soul and heads on to the afterlife, only regretting that he couldn't help his girlfriend more. Then this old geezer shows up and says that he'll be carried to heaven to serve God. And that's it, he's gone. Nobody says anything else, it's just back to the old grind. Well then. Back on the surface, the Roppongi force field thing is gone, so we can advance to the north to a new place. This little entrance right here brings us to a fairly important location in the game, known as the Great Crossroads. This place is a nexus to numerous locations, and it's got some tough demons that may give you a hard time when you first arrive. From here, we can reach Ginza, Ikebukuro, the police station, and naturally, Roppongi where we just came from. To give us a bit of direction, Charlie's ghost appears and asks us if we'd like to visit the police station. Someone inside has revived an army of police robots, and someone's gotta stop the mastermind from causing serious damage. All we have to do to get there is walk straight ahead, though before you do that, you're gonna want to visit a room next to the path where Steven is waiting. He offers to improve our summoning program yet again so that we can summon more demons. Nice. You can also run into none other than Naoki if you head to the west towards Ikebukuro, but he encourages you not to go there, though he won't tell us why. Whatever. For now, let's just take his word for it and visit the police station. This is a pretty simple dungeon, there's not a whole lot to say about it. There are a lot of dark sections throughout, but if you cast the map spell, you can just navigate using that. The place is crawling with robots, most of which are fairly weak, though some of these bigger guys can deal damage that starts to add up. You're gonna hate me for saying this shit for the 1000th time, but you can cast lightning spells to really blow through the place. This isn't even to stun them, they're fucking robots, so a big lightning bolt tends to make them stop working pretty quickly. When you reach the end, this crazy ass scientist says he's gonna use his robot army to kill literally everything in Tokyo, and then he sends out a sizable group of them to take care of you. Hit them with a Mazio and mop up the rest with your nerve bullets. It's a cakewalk. The next fight is a bit more challenging. You have to fight the defense system itself, and he's substantially stronger. You might actually want to try buffs and debuffs on this one. If you have Momonofu still, he can debuff the enemy's accuracy and boost your attack. Provided you can keep the boss busy for 4 or 5 turns, you can ramp up your power significantly and put out close to 100 damage per turn, killing him rather quickly. At this point in the game, Momonofu is getting weak, and there are probably better choices, but it worked for me, so as long as you're throwing out those attack buffs, you'll do fine. Beating this fight earns you a memory board, which we can use in just a bit to upgrade our summoning program again. To be honest, I think you could skip this dungeon if you really wanted to. It doesn't seem like anything absolutely necessary happens here, though the additional upgrade helps and you do gain a few extra levels in the process. It's kind of a unique dungeon because unlike the other places where you return to them a couple times, or at least they have shops or NPCs, this one's basically just off on its own on a dead-end path. With this out of the way, let's check out Ginza. We can save Ikebukuro for last. This time in the Great Crossroads, you're going to want to take the eastern path. Ginza is a large area with a couple floors and a lot of things to do. One of the first things I recommend doing is checking out the weapons store and buying the Browning machine gun. It's kinda steep at 20,000 Maka, but it's totally worth it. This thing will significantly boost your power and make the dozens and dozens of encounters you face here much easier. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Ray can use it, but you can buy here a Spots 12 shotgun that's kind of okay. You can upgrade your armor here too, though I opted not to, which ended up working in my favor because there's a much better set you can get in the next town and we'll be there before too long. I highly recommend sticking around here for a bit and trying to recruit as many demons as you can manage. This is a great place to start stacking up a powerful team. If you're having trouble getting through the fights here, try out Ray's Mahama spell on some of the demons. It works on a good bit of them, and if the attack hits, it will kill them instantly. I've heard more than a few people refer to the Ginza grind as something that can be difficult to get through. There certainly are a painful amount of encounters here, it only gets worse as we draw closer to visiting Ikebukuro and the late game dungeons. One of the worst feelings is taking down a group of like 6 or 7 enemies, only to have another one spawn immediately after that, and sometimes, if you're unlucky, you can even have a third appear. Be sure you're saving often, and just do your best to push through. As I mentioned earlier, Estoma is an option, but then you're missing out on being able to recruit, as well as the extra money. It's kind of a double-edged sword, and unfortunately, the game at times does not have a balance between 0 encounters and unbearably tedious 8-stack slap fights every 2 steps. When you reach Ginza's second basement, be sure you seek out Steven for a free storage upgrade that allows you to keep 10 demons in your stock. Then heal yourself up and get your party ready. Before we can advance beyond Ginza, we've got an interesting little fight to take care of. Blocking the way towards a doorway that leads to a new area is a demon summoner, who says he'll let us pass if we pay him 10,000 Maka. Sure, we could pay him, but why would you do that? Let's just challenge the guy. This is the first of a handful of demon summoner fights you can do. Each one plays out basically the same way. You have to face 3 separate battles of a horde of demons before they give up. One of our first battles is against 8 Pisakas. Extremely easy. Just throw out some multi-target fire and lightning spells, use your nerve bullets, and they'll be finished in a single turn. Next up, we've got 8 Baycocks. Oh boy. Well, considering we've been seeing this guy close to since the start of the game, it's not really anything to be concerned about. They do just a bit more damage than the Pisakas, so if you can't clear them all out in one turn, you'll take a few mediocre hits, but you should have them done by the second or third turn at the very latest. Finally, we got these guys. Lackey Lack? I'm trying, I promise. Suitable for the final round, these are strongest by far, but you can nail them with a Mahama or Mazio, and they won't last long. They can hit you with some Zan spells and do decent damage overall, but really, as long as you keep up the same strategy as the other battles, you'll be just fine. So you finally beat the guy, and you get a really underwhelming amount of experience, and he starts referring to you as boss. Now, let's not get too friendly, I'm just passing through. After a nice stroll through a little tunnel, you come out in Shinagawa. This area is the headquarters of the Law faction, and we're about to reunite with an old friend. Well, more like someone who died a couple hours ago. You might notice the bridge over there to the right, but don't bother, we can't use that shit yet. Let's hop into the city and see what kind of crack the Messiahs are smoking. It's another sprawl in here, so get ready. This place to me is like the one city that actually feels like people would live in it, but only on the first floor. Things are divided up in a semi-logical way. When you walk in, you got your terminal, healer, and shops, and they're all contained in this one big room. Next room over is a series of dorms that even has a little spot to watch TV. How quaint. Now when you go upstairs, the place devolves into a teleportation demon onslaught nightmare, but whoever designed this first floor really deserves some credit. Oh yeah, and like I mentioned back in Ginza, there's a cool armor set here that I thought was pretty good for the price. Check out the armor shop and consider buying the dragon set. Even if you only buy the chest piece, it gives pretty good additional defense. In these games, I tend to buy armor every 2 or 3 towns rather than constantly, and this one stood out to me as a reasonable choice. Once you're done buying shit, really you can just head upstairs, but the dorms are a good source of random trivia if you're interested. One of the most relevant is from this kid who tells you about a golden apple that was stolen by the Gaians, aka the Chaos faction, and taken to Ueno. Keep a mental note of that for a while. Also, be sure not to miss the statue of Charlie wearing some fancy Messiah clothes. I wonder what this could mean. Is he alive? Let's see. Upstairs you got some bullshit. The second floor is just a giant puzzle. It's filled with teleporters that warp you back to the stairs you start at, and there are also tiles you can step on that spin your character around to try and confuse you. Amidst all of this is one teleporter that can warp you to a useful sword, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. It is optional, but you should try and grab it. Eventually, you can just figure this out by process of elimination and trying all the teleporters, but if you're having trouble, it's the third one from the east in the second row. The next floor is pretty significant. It's largely empty except for one room near the middle where, as you may have guessed already with your excellent deduction skill, Charlie is alive, having been resurrected by God to spread the ways of his 1,000-year kingdom. He explains that he is determined to establish this kingdom as God's Messiah, and asks if it will help him defeat a demon known as Echidna somewhere in eastern Tokyo. Now you kinda need to be careful about coming in here and seeing this dialogue. Depending on your alignment, it can play out a few ways. I happen to be neutral, so Charlie basically just told me his plan and asked if we'd do it, and then he let us go. If you're heavily law aligned already, you might just get forced into having to do it, and if you're deep into chaos, he won't want your help and you'll have to do a boss fight. I sorta lucked out here and didn't get locked in anything too early. This is really the only thing of note on the third floor, so whether or not you go in here yet is up to you. Finally, we got the fourth floor, where we need to grab an important item. Be mindful of some warps up here, as well as a hole that drops you down a floor. There are some incense scattered around up here too if you want them. What we're looking for is this demon summoner right here. He's got some shit we just can't live without, so let's see if he's any stronger than the last guy. Well, not really. The first wave is completely pointless. You can annihilate all 8 of these guys instantly. Things ramp up a bit with the second wave, as this group can at least scratch you with some fire magic before they go down. Shoot fire back at them, use lightning, basically use anything you have that hits more than one enemy at a time, and they won't last long. The final part of the fight is against 8 Barbagazi, who can freeze you with ice attacks. Hit them with fire, and you'll find that they're quite weak to it, bringing our next demon summoner fight to a close. You know, I think the idea of fighting another summoner is cool, and Atlas must have thought so too, considering they made an entire sub-series called Devil Summoner, but man, these battles are incredibly underwhelming. I guess they're a good way to test your ability to bring down huge swaths of enemies when you're outnumbered, but it'd be nice if you ever had to rely on a strategy other than just the same old fire and lightning spells. Even buffing isn't worth it, because the battles hardly last more than 2 or 3 turns. Anyway, you get the 4-way gem, which we'll need to advance the story later on. With that, we're done with Shinagawa. Where to next? We got a lead on the Golden Apple in Ueno, but so far, the only other place we haven't gone to at the Crossroads is Ikebukuro. Let's see what the Chaos Hero's up to. After backtracking to the tunnels and emerging onto the surface in a new area, Naoki stops us and asks why the hell we came here. He says he's got no choice and that he has to take us in for some sort of trial. What the shit? He brings us into the court of Lord Yama and explains that we have to defend ourselves for the crime of maliciously manipulating demons. Is this guy for real? Are we just gonna forget about the time he stole a demon from my party and fused it into his body? Give me a break. Lord Yama begins the trial by saying that our usage of the demon summoning program violates an ancient contract, but considering the way the world is now, he understands why we've been doing it. He offers us a mission to prove that we only summon demons with noble intentions. That mission is to sabotage the construction of a huge cathedral being built by the Messians. What should we do? I mean, when we met Charlie, he didn't force us into a choice, so technically I'm not working for him. But I don't really want to work for this guy either. Naoki seems like the biggest hypocrite in the world right now. So I decided to tell Yama to shove this mission up his ass, and understandably, he gets angry at us and throws us in jail. Now, if you do decide to help him, you basically skip all this next part. But fuck it, I've escaped jail in this game once, I can do it again. This dungeon is simultaneously one of my favorite and least favorite of the game. The premise is really neat. You have to escape your cell and fight your way out of the prison, battling the warden and even the judge to win your freedom. You start out at the top on the 4th floor and have to work your way down to the 1st where the exit is. What brings the experience down a couple of notches is that the encounter rate is so high in here that it makes me want to jump out of a plane with a parachute tied to my dick. Needless to say, Estoma or some items to reduce the amount of battles you fight are important if you don't want to go fucking insane. I know I've been bringing it up a lot in this video, but it's just really a striking thing about this game. Some areas are totally reasonable and have demons every so often, and then some just ramp it up to every step, and it sucks a lot of the enjoyment out of what would otherwise be an interesting place. I'm aware that I defend other games on this channel that are less than perfect, like Shin Megami Tensei If, or Digital Devil Story, but I swear it's more consistent in those games. I guess logically it makes sense, like you're breaking out of prison and you're getting swarmed with crazy ass demons at all sides, but it doesn't feel intentional enough for it to be very fun. Sure, you're gonna need the money and XP to progress further, but couldn't that have been balanced differently? At least the boss fights in this place are cool. Before you fight the warden Neo, be sure you find Steven's room nearby because he can heal you and save your game. This guy really gets around. Neo can buff his defense and put out modest damage, and he can also stun your party with Shibuya. I actually got some use out of debuffs here. Letting him fully stack his defenses can make the fight drag on longer than it has to, so if you're capable, be sure to counter his buffs. It essentially makes him waste that turn, and then you can attack more without worrying about healing. Not too bad of a fight. The Judge Yama puts up a better challenge. This guy is actually immune to most damage spells, so you can't even stun lock him repeatedly. It's gonna be a fair fight whether you want it or not. That being said, he can't buff himself, so a full buff of your attack will let you melt through this guy like butter. Yama can use fire spells against you, but they weren't really threatening for me because at least 2 of my demons happen to null fire damage entirely. Just keep an eye on your party's health and throw out healing when it looks like someone could die within the next couple turns. He also has the ability to cast Mudo, though it isn't nearly as powerful as when Nebiros used it earlier. Unless you're really unlucky, this probably won't kill you. After blasting through each of these bosses, you'll probably have gained 6 or 7 levels. They drop a ton of XP, so we can fuse some pretty sick shit soon. All that's left in Ikebukuro once you beat the 2 bosses is the 1st floor, where there are the usual shops, healers, and a terminal to save at. Upgrade your stuff if you really need to, and then head outside. It's time to get that golden apple from Ueno. East of Ikebukuro, you'll come across a little house that you can pass through. Ueno can be accessed by getting to the other side, though this isn't the last time we'll be here. There's a boss we'll have to come back for in a bit. Ueno itself is pretty small, so if you were exhausted by the past few areas, you can consider this a sort of a breather. The 1st floor offers yet another save point and group of shops, which I largely ignored. If you want another memory board to upgrade your demon summoning program, you can find this weird little mechanical dwarf guy who threatens to murder you. Beat his 3 groups of demons and you're all set. As for the fights, they're even easier than before. You get corpses, phantoms, and then 2 groups of enemies that are actually appropriate for your level. This is a pretty effortless way to get an upgrade, and the extra stock definitely can come in handy as we rapidly approach the end of the game. Downstairs, you run into a guy called Louis Cypher. These demons really need to work on their pseudonyms. This is probably the most significant figure we've encountered so far though, so it's pretty funny to just find him in some random corridor. I guess he couldn't resist hanging out near the apple downstairs. So Louis, as his friends call him, says someone here wants to see us, It's none other than our old friend Yuriko. She says that I was supposed to choose her as my partner and transforms into her true form, the demon Lilith, expressing her desire to kill us as revenge. Ultimately, she can't manage to do it, and then Mr. Lewis apologizes for the interruption and walks out. Alrighty then. Aside from this, there's hardly anything to say about Ueno. Head downstairs, make your way through 2 very small floors that contain dark sections, and you'll come across a boss called Ladon. Bring him down with your usual strategies. Those levels we gained from the Ikebukuro bosses make this guy even less of a threat than he already was, since at this point your health is likely in the 600s or 700s. He doesn't have any tricky moves to look out for, just moderate damage that can easily be healed away. After that, grab the golden apple and head outside. We're about to enter what I would call the beginning of the end. Our next destination is to the south, Tokyo Destinyland, which just as it sounds, is this game's version of Disneyland. Unfortunately, except for the outside appearance and a really weird minigame, it's nothing at all like a theme park, but it is a big dungeon where we can find one of the Chaos Faction's leaders, Echidna. Just like our pre-apocalypse adventures with Goutou and Thorman, we're gonna have to decide whether we want to help Charlie, Echidna, or neither. Let's see what she has to say. As you head towards Destinyland, you come across a bridge where the golden apple causes Cerberus, who's wandering around aimlessly, to rejoin the party. He recognizes you immediately and says the last thing he remembers was being teleported by a strange machine, all the way back at the start of the game. At this point, I did already out-level him, but his damage isn't bad, and you can always feel free to fuse him again into something else. Let's take a look at the dungeon. Interestingly, aside from the first floor, it's mostly linear, though the encounter rate is through the roof here. Be sure to activate the terminal and heal yourself before fully going inside. Blocking the way to the dungeon proper is Naoki, with some girl by his side. He excitedly says that he's joined up with the Chaos Faction to fight against God's sinister plan, which is a pretty hilarious thing to open up a conversation with. Now, this girl's name is just too fucking perfect. Naoki introduces her as Rie, and I was completely convinced they just took Rei's name and switched the letters around as some kind of joke. Rei even says that Rie creeps her out. I mean, come on, it's totally some evil twin shit. If you think about it for a few minutes, it's clear that the game couldn't do this. I mean, if you name your partner Cockshit77 or something, obviously the joke wouldn't work, but I have to say, it's a hell of a funny coincidence. Anyway, the first floor is big, but most of the space is taken up by a minigame that you can play to manipulate your character's alignment. Essentially, you can pay this dude 5,000 Maka, and then you get to pick a series of doors to walk through. Once you reach the final door, you'll have to fight an enemy, and depending on which one you get, your alignment will be shifted. This process can be repeated until you're at the alignment you want to be. I tried this once, and I really wasn't into it. For my playthrough, I was basically just choosing whatever felt natural and getting whatever ending came to me. It feels a little too gamey to abuse something like this to get a particular ending. It hardly makes sense in a world where almost everything else has some kind of lore explanation. I do understand why it's there, because if you just want to get a specific ending, it's nice to have a way to guarantee that, but I opted to ignore it. As you explore the place, you'll encounter some unavoidable tiles that are basically a luck check. If the game decides you're lucky, you just keep going, but if not, sometimes you can really eat shit. I'm not sure what all these traps can do to you, but I was cursed a few times, which can be a pain in the ass to remove, and once I was turned into a frog. Better hope you're a lucky person. There's a shitload of luck incense laying around this dungeon, so take advantage of those too. I'm assuming a higher stat increases your odds of escaping unscathed, but it seemed to be about a 50-50 split between which ones hurt me and which didn't, and my luck stat was pretty low. From the moment you reach the second floor, you're just navigating a series of linear hallways with teleports at the end which bounce you between floors until you arrive at an area where you can find Echidna. There's also an optional devil summoner fight along the way. If you can beat her, she'll give you a demon. There's not much I can say about this fight that I haven't said about the others, but it's definitely the hardest one so far, so I'd recommend facing it with a full party if you can manage it. After a long while of crawling corridors, you'll come across Echidna's room. Damn, why is she so close to the screen? Relax. She gives us a little background story. She's a goddess who gave birth to a variety of demons to test the worth of other heroes, and she lives here in Destinyland to guard the place as a bastion against the Law faction. The scoop on the Law guys is that naturally, they're planning to bring God to Earth to create the Millennium Kingdom, and that they're building a brand new cathedral to speed things along. You may recall Lord Yama talking about this earlier. Echidna says that once God gets here, non-believers are going to be wiped out entirely, and his followers will be physically and mentally dominated. Well shit. Apparently, God dethroned all other demons in this game to take the spot as head honcho for himself. And ever since he did this, demons and humans just could not get along. Sounds like he really messed things up. So, the Echidna presents us an offer. Head back to Shinagawa and confront a high-ranking angel. That should be enough to stall their plans for a bit. I had to think about it for a minute. I didn't exactly want to side with Law, but I wasn't fully convinced on Chaos either. I eventually came to the conclusion that leaving the Law side entirely unchecked would be a bad idea, since I already blasted my way through a Chaos prison and took several key figures with me. We gotta keep both sides in check if we're gonna get through this properly. So, I agree to Echidna's request. Let's head back to Shinagawa and see what's going on in Charlie's room. Cast a spell to warp yourself to the start of the dungeon, hop in a terminal, and make a quick jog back up the stairs at Shinagawa. When we get there, Charlie barely has time to squeeze out a few words before a divine voice takes over for him and says that we're beyond saving. It's the angel Haniel, and he decides to throw us into the fires of hell for working with Echidna. Well, I definitely saw that coming. Let's see what he's got. I would say this is the most challenging fight yet, and he's still not very challenging. The bosses in this game, while cool design-wise, are pretty lacking. Haniel's agility stat seems to be decently high because he'd often take the first action with multi-target spells like Maziunga and Mahama. Just like we've done with other enemies, Haniel's lightning can stun us, but the damage it does is so pitiful that aside from a wasted turn, you're not losing much. Even if he does it twice or 3 times in a row, really, it's not that big of a deal. Eventually he'll quit, and then you can quickly recover and counterattack. Mahama can instant kill some of your demons, but it'll never kill you, so you don't have to worry about getting a sudden game over. Keep up the attacks, debuff the guy, and he'll drop before too long. Afterwards, Charlie's freaked the hell out by what just happened and says we're abusing our power, then he runs off. Guess we better report back to Echidna. After another backtrack all the way to the heart of the Tokyo Destinyland, Echidna congratulates us on our work, explaining the next stage of the Gaian's plan is to invade the Messiah Cathedral and take it over. She asks for our help in this endeavor, but fuck that, this is our chance to break even. Echidna is an even easier version of Haniel. She's slower and seems to be weaker, except for one annoying move where she can bite a party member and paralyze them. You can beat her in just a few minutes, there's nothing to it. Fortunately, she still offers up a lot of XP, so at least you get a significant amount of power for your trouble. So, 2 major figures on each side of this conflict are out of the picture. We've explored basically every town we can find. What the shit are we supposed to do now? Remember, the cathedral's still out there, we just haven't offered up our services to attacking or defending it. It seems like a good idea to go and check it out for ourselves, but where is it? For those of us on the neutral path, the only way forward is through Ginza. Kinda like in the game prior to this one, Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei 2, Ginza seems to be that one city where things converge and important shit goes down. In the lower parts of the city, you can run across that old-ass man from the start of the game, who tells us that no matter which side takes over the cathedral, the result will be the same. Humanity gets tricked by an outside influence and turned into a joke of its former self. He opens a path for us behind him that leads to an entrance to the cathedral. It's going to be on us to end the conflict with the best interests of humanity in mind. This is the final stretch of the game. We got big shit coming, so get ready. In a nearby hallway, you can hear both Charlie and Naoki arguing with each other. Talking to both of them has them reveal their motivations for being here. Naturally, Naoki is working on taking the place over with the Gaians to stop God from being summoned, and Charlie is trying to do the exact opposite. They each ask you to visit the 4 Guardians of Tokyo. Naoki wants us to gather their power to help with the invasion, and Charlie just wants them dead so God can descend. We're gonna fight these guys, but not for anything related to either faction, just as a test of our own power. So we need to find our way out of here. Fortunately, upstairs, the cathedral offers shops and a terminal so you can easily warp to places we've been before. There are actually 2 shopping areas in the cathedral. One is law-aligned and the other is chaos. Either one works since we're neutral. Now, each of the 4 guardians are located far to the north, south, east, and west sides of Tokyo. They live in mansions, which you've probably seen by now. We passed through one earlier during our little quest to Ikebukuro and Ueno. The fights themselves are a real joke, I'm sorry. I'm sure you were hoping for some epic cross-country story of life or death combat, but they're so easy, you can really just auto-battle them. The biggest fight to these guys is just finding them. The first I fought, Komokuten, is in a house south of Shinagawa. Then I fought Jikokuten, who lives near Tokyo Disneyland. After that, Bishamonten near Ueno, who's easily the most difficult, because attacks can actually do more than tickle your fucking balls with a feather, and finally, Zochoten near Shibuya. As I said, none of them are hard, and the mansions are very small. Get it over with, and head back to the cathedral. Revisit one of your friends. I chose Charlie. He's happy that we've defeated the four lords, but all of a sudden, the whole place starts shaking as he says that God's fury has arrived. What do you mean? He goes on to say that all heathens have been wiped from the earth, and urges us to go look outside. Alright, so we turn our ass around and walk all the way back outside to see what happened. Now before you go out, trust me, stop in this room on the Messiah side and prevent this octopus from being ritually sacrificed. I know that's probably not a sentence you were expecting to hear today, but really, grab the octopus. You'll see why in a second. Step outside and, well, that's no good. The entire city's been flooded. We're stuck on this damn rock. Or at least that's what I would be saying if this octopus didn't owe me its life. With his help, we can at least traverse the ocean that used to be Tokyo, which is required to reach one last location we have to clear before finishing the game. Head back down to your friends in the hallway for the 7,000th time, and you'll get some important updates. Charlie says that Vishnu, a law-aligned deity, is locked in combat at the Tokyo government office with another deity called Ravana. You might remember this building as the place we saved Ray from being executed at all those hours ago. Crazy how time flies. Now he tells you the same thing, but urges you to take out Vishnu and give the Chaos side a leg up in the conflict. As usual, we're gonna knock both of them out so neither side can win. Let's make some final preparations before we leave. In one of the towns upstairs, visit the Cathedral of Shadows. In addition to fusing demons here, you can also do a little thing called sword fusion if you have the right materials. One of the swords we can start the fusion with is the Kusanagi no Tsurugi we found during our very first visit to Shinagawa in the teleportation maze. Basically how it works is you can fuse these swords with element demons to create a new sword. How do you get element demons? Well, you can fuse them, or you can trade gemstones for them at motherfucking Rag's shop. I bet you thought I was gonna go this entire episode without talking about Rag. You can find them in most places where there's weapon and armor shops. So, fusing the Kusanagi sword with a Sylph demon gets you the Futsu sword, which can then be fused with an Undine to get the Murakumo, and finally, the Murakumo can be fused with a Salamander to get the Hinokagetsuchi, an iconic sword in the series that is extremely powerful. This will make the final encounters much easier. It's not required by any means, and in fact, I didn't use the Hinokagetsuchi in my playthrough, but the final bosses have a pretty substantial amount of health, and if you're worried about it, well, this is a simple way to fix that. I only fused my way up to the Murakumo, and it worked just fine, but I figured it was worth mentioning. Once you're ready, board your octopus and sail to the Shinjuku area from near the start of the game. Even though everything's flooded, you can still generally tell your way around just by looking below the water. You do have to face encounters while in the ocean, because of course you do, so be prepared to take them down. You can find an assortment of buildings up here that I wasn't really able to determine a purpose for on my playthrough. I know if you're on the neutral path, you can actually find the deity Masakado and get an armor set, but considering the way I was melting through bosses and encounters like butter, I just didn't feel very compelled to look into it. One of the places I came across was actually Tokyo Tower, which can be entered by sailing up to it, but there wasn't anything special inside aside from a handful of fights. Kinda interesting though. When you finally reach the government building and step inside, you'll find a terminal and two staircases, one on the left, one on the right. Each leads to a different section of the tower, and we'll have to clear both. They're simple enough to navigate. I don't think there are any traps to be worried about, so just navigate a few short mazes for each side, and you'll reach its boss. The west side is where Vishnu can be fought. Hopefully you've got some powerful physical attackers, as well as a couple demons with full heal spells. Magic attacks aren't as effective against Vishnu as just slapping him around, so go all out with your sword and cast a few attack buffs. He can use the spell Megiddo against you to do modest damage, and if you're unlucky, he'll insta-kill some of your demons with Mahama. This boss can actually also heal himself with the Diorama, but it isn't very effective, and odds are you'll be doing more damage than he heals in a single turn. The boss can actually be made pretty simple by just soloing it, which sounds pretty funny, but considering the Hama line of spells doesn't work on humans and Megiddo's damage can easily be healed away, you could probably just put the thing on auto and pause it every once in a while to heal yourself. Vishnu drops a whole assload of XP. By now your level's probably quite high, and if you've been dumping points into Vitality, you'll be approaching the HP limit. After a few more boss fights, negotiation will become extremely easy since you'll outlevel almost everything in the game. This makes it easy to quickly assemble an endgame party if you haven't started doing so already. On the east side of the tower we've got Ravana, who is far easier than Vishnu. His attacks are weaker, there's no insta-kills, basically just keep doing what you've been doing. The only catch to this fight is that you have to fight another guy immediately after, Indrajit. He's a bit stronger and he can use Makara Karn to reflect all magic attacks back at you, but if you stick with physical, you'll do just fine. There's basically no way he can win unless you're heavily underleveled or you refuse to heal for several turns. After that, well, that about does it for this little conflict. All that's left is to beat back the last of both sides and take over the cathedral for ourselves. Charlie disavows his friendship with us, saying that next time we meet, he'll kill us for God. Naoki, on the other hand, says he likes us, but he's still gonna kill us later. At least he's a little more relaxed about the situation. Jeez. Can't we just agree that things are well past fucked and go pick up coffee or something? After the two leave, we meet with the old man again, who explains that the leader of the forces of law, Seraph Michael, is waiting on the top floor of the cathedral, and the Chaos leader, Lord Azura, is lurking on the bottom floor. The fight between each side is coming to a standstill, so this is our chance to quickly take out each of their leaders and wrap things up. From here, it's up to you which one you want to take on first. I decided to venture downstairs to face Asura, since it feels stupid to walk all the way to the top of the cathedral just to go back down to the bottom. With that, it's finally time to properly explore the Great Cathedral. The floors tend to be quite large and designed to make you snake around corridors for as long as possible before reaching the stairs. If we were on either the Law or Chaos routes, we'd have an opportunity to make a few detours on some of these floors to grab some optional alignment-specific equipment. As I said with the Masakatas set, it felt difficult for me to actually care about doing this. Just buy a set from the shops on the first floor and call it a day. There's nothing in the game that really necessitates having the best armor aside from bragging rights or 100% completion. Provided you're using some armor that's semi-recent, you'll be fine. The rapid level ups we've been getting from bosses are more than enough to see you through to the end, and they aren't stopping. We've still got a full cathedral filled with high-ranking demons to beat, which is going to send our level even higher. Let's get to it. The first boss you'll come across while making your way to the bottom basement is Cert on Basement 2. He calls us a puppet of God and claims that humans are destined to die, then decides to expedite that process for us. Interestingly enough, this guy is level 100, but you wouldn't think it from how he fights. Sometimes he seems to waste turns on purpose. One of his moves is to create a wall of fire that decreases the amount of damage he takes from fire spells. Seems like a decent enough ability, but it stops being impressive once you realize he'll cast it repeatedly for no reason. Just beat on him with anything but fire, and make sure you can keep your party's health topped off. His physical attack can do well over 100 damage, but with the numbers we're rocking, that's jack shit. He'll dump like 3 more levels worth of points for you to boost your character with too. Our power level is pretty damn high, and most random encounters will have no problem letting you escape if you get sick of them. The third basement features Astaroth, who can charm your team and buff his defenses. Most of the time, I would just set ready to defend to avoid the charm, then cast a healing spell to fix up anyone that got affected by it. It's best to have a way to either debuff his defense or increase your attack, otherwise you'll probably end up wasting a few minutes slowly chipping his health down. After clearing out the 4th floor, our next boss is— oh my god, what the fuck? This is actually disgusting. Whose idea was this? I really regret not taking the law path. So, this is Ariok, who is mostly immune to physical damage. Seems like a pain in the ass, but there's a really easy way to win this fight. If you load your gun with magic shells that you can find in the shops, you can spam the shit out of those and make the boss kill itself. These bullets have a chance of inflicting charm on enemies, and it works on bosses, so set your team to defend, blast that gun until the charm takes hold, and then just wait. I literally autoed this entire fight and barely took a scratch. Keep up the pressure with the bullets and the charm will barely have time to wear off, making what would otherwise be a gimmicky battle stupidly simple. The next 2 floors don't have a boss and are mostly short and sweet, except for one that's filled with damage tiles that harm all of your non-chaos aligned characters. You can avoid this damage with a core shield item if you have one. Lewis Cypher also approaches you down here and urges you to visit an island to the west for something to help us out. I actually meant to do this and completely forgot about it until I was well past finishing the game, but all you get for this is an extra boss fight against Beelzebub, so I didn't miss that much. Also, he lied. There's nothing helpful about it at all, unless you're on the Chaos route or you'll join your party. It's a neat little extra, but I don't think it's worth walking all the way back outside for it. Once you're past floor 6, Asura is really close. The 7th floor is where we face off against the Chaos hero. Naoki had hoped that we would join his side and thinks our pursuit of balance is pointless. He believes that scales are made to be tipped and he won't have it any other way. With no other choice, we've got to bring him down to proceed. Unfortunately, even though he gives it his best, Naoki is just not very threatening. I kind of feel like there's a plot aspect to this. We've been so busy fighting off both sides that this guy who spent his time being played as a pawn by the demons stands no chance against us. None of his attacks are even remotely scary compared to the past few bosses. It's an easy time, but you'll probably feel a little bad as you wear down his health. As Naoki dies, he questions his abilities, saying that he thought he was finally ready to take on God's power. His last words are him wondering if it was all just a dream, and then the room goes quiet, until his girlfriend busts in and reveals her true identity as Lilith. Wait, wasn't Yuriko Lilith? Is this Yuriko? Wasn't her name Rie, or was that a disguise? I'm a little confused on that one, but oh well. We've got another quick fight on our hands. Lilith can charm and put our party to sleep, but her defenses suck. She takes quite a beating from your attacks, so if you buff yourself up even a little bit, you will melt straight through her. Charm is pretty much the only object of concern here, otherwise it's probably the easiest endgame boss battle. With both Naoki and Lilith out of the way forward is finally clear. We've come too far to turn back now. Let's finish off Azura so this wall count for something. The old man urges us to finish the fight and turns into Laosha, his true form. Step in Azura's room and he mocks us for fighting for God's side. Well, you're kinda wrong about that, but I guess that's what it looks like. He berates us for betraying our friend and decides to send us to go meet him in the afterlife. Short and to the point. I like that. Azura has a shitload of health. This is a decently challenging fight, so do not underestimate it. Whereas most bosses we've fought had something in the range of 1,000 to 2,000 health points, Azura has around 10,000, which needless to say is a pretty sharp increase. No matter what you're packing for this fight, whether it's the Hinokagutsuchi or a squad of the best demons, you're going to be here for at least a few minutes, so settle in for the long haul. Azura's attacks are pretty powerful, but there's a couple of smart ways you can counter it and make it work for you. One is to use the spell Tetrakarn and reflect his physical attacks back at him, and the other is just to have the demon Rongdo, who reflects physical damage by default. You'll almost find yourself wanting to get hit, because each round he'll do about 250 damage to himself for free. His spells are mostly weak, just heal through them if he continues to spam them. Try to have some Somos before you get here, and enter the fight with as much MP as you can manage. You'll be going all out with your strongest moves and spells, and with such a high health bar, running out of magic can really do you in. Just like Ariok earlier, if you try for long enough, Azura can be charmed with magic bullets, causing him to beat himself up for several turns. It may take you like 6 or 7 tries for the effect to kick in, but eventually it will, and then you can use that opportunity to heal up and deal some extra damage. Keep it up, and after a while, he'll go down. Chaos has finally been defeated. Azura laments that they were so close to taking over the cathedral and making Lucifer's utopia a reality before disappearing. As climactic as that might have been, we aren't done yet. We still gotta work our ass all the way to the top of the place to beat Michael. Instead of walking back to the first floor, just cast a teleport spell and warp back to the terminal, then start from there. So, the path topside is much like what we just did. A handful of bosses and huge maze-like floors we gotta bust through before fighting the Law Hero and then the final boss. This shit's basically a victory lap. If you want to run away from every encounter or demand that the demons give you money, they'll do it. You're probably in the upper 70s or low 80s now in terms of level. Run through the first and second floors and you'll reach Uriel, who promises to purge us from the earth for our sins. We'll see about that. Aside from being able to cast Tetrakarn to reflect physical damage, Uriel is a bog standard boss fight. We literally just killed one of the game's final bosses, so this should feel disgustingly easy. Smack his nuts and he'll drop, and then it's on to the next. The third floor boasts Gabriel, who's very similar to Ariok in that he doesn't take damage from physical attacks either. The magic bullet strategy still works, as do spells like Megidola. Buff up your magic attack or remove his defense, or both, and then get to casting. The fight is only going to drag on if you're running a mostly physical damage team like I was. The fourth floor is filled with warp tiles that lead you on a goose chase towards some special equipment, like the Megiddo Fire Gun and the Sword of Heaven. We can't use this shit. We're neutral aligned, and it's only good for law players, so the only thing to do here is fight the boss and continue. This time we got Raphael. He's immune to most spells, so don't bother. buff up, slap his ass cheeks, move on. After beating him, you've actually got to step outside and make your way to the south door to advance higher into the cathedral. It's pretty neat to get some perspective as to how big the place is supposed to be. This will probably be the last time we see the light of day, so take a minute, listen to the music, breathe in that cold, dead apocalypse air, and get ready for the final showdown. After clearing a very easy floor 5, you'll notice that the 6 has those damage tiles from earlier, except this time, they hurt everyone who isn't law aligned. Just tank them as best as you can, and get out of this big room as fast as possible. The way out is toward the east end of the room. From there, it's mostly easy going as you make it to the 7th floor, where Charlie's waiting. He wonders why we haven't woken up to the truth yet, and explains that humans are inherently weak, spending their lives wandering lost until they inevitably die. Charlie believes our search for balance is like searching for something that doesn't exist, and says that he can wait no longer for us to accept God's path. Just like Naoki, it's a piece of cake to finish off Charlie. Consider it a brief moment to reflect on how far we've come, and how deep into this we are. One last fight after this, and it'll finally all be over. I wasn't sure which path I'd end up on as I played through. I kinda just chose whatever felt right in the moment, and naturally ended up here. I was thinking I'd actually end up on the law side for our little prison break in Ikebukuro, but here we are, beating back each with a huge amount of power. Hopefully, it was the right call. When Charlie's done, he seems to realize in his last moments that he was used by God as a sacrifice, and he never really was chosen as Messiah after all. Shit, that kinda stings. Well, having left a massive trail of bodies in our wake, I'm sure we can handle one more fight for the better good. Let's make sure Charlie's death isn't the way all people end up. Step into the final room on floor 8, and there he is, the man of the hour, Seraph Michael. He calls us a pathetic excuse for a savior, and wonders how we can be so arrogant to refuse God's 1,000-year kingdom. He wonders if we're fighting against God intentionally, or if we've just been relying on our instincts all this time to stay alive. Either way, he can't let us live, and the last battle begins. Michael has a physical attack that's just as good as Asura's, as well as a critical strike that tends to deal over 250 damage to a single target. He can also nuke your party for medium damage. If the critical strike hits Rei, you might be screwed unless you can bring her back to life with another demon. After you set up your buffs and get to attacking, it may be best to just have your healers defend until it's necessary to use them. You should be able to hang in for 2 or 3 turns with no healing before you cast a full heal and endlessly repeat the process. The power we've gained from Asura and the other demons makes this fight slightly easier, but it's still a challenge, and Michael still has around 10,000 health. You can charm him if you need to, but I never really found it necessary. This is basically just another standard fight, made into an impressive endurance round. You know, there's also no final boss music here either, which is kinda disappointing. Oh well. Be on him for a few minutes, keep your team topped off, and ensure Rei stays alive, and soon enough, Michael goes down, earning us control over the cathedral. As soon as the fight ends, you're brought to the very top of the cathedral to meet Laosha, who says that we've accomplished the impossible. Against incredible odds, we've defeated the forces of law and chaos. Laosha admits that God's 1,000-year kingdom did have its bright sides, regulations in order to preserve peace after all, but those who would live there would never experience any real freedom. The world of chaos also has its advantages, offering absolute freedom, but it would only lead to endless conflict and an inability to ever reach true peace. Through the path of balance that we've chosen, happiness can be found, and humanity can rebuild. We no longer have to wander aimlessly through the wasteland. The world can be made good again without the help of outside powers with ulterior motives. Humans are finally back in charge. And that's the end of Shin Megami Tensei. This game has been quite the adventure. The atmosphere, music, and overall mood of the story are spot on, and the opening hours of the game to this day are some of the most subtly disturbing and surreal moments I've experienced in an RPG. It's something really special, and I think anyone interested in the apocalyptic worlds of Megami Tensei would be doing themselves a huge disservice by not checking it out for themselves. The combat, while functional, tends to get pretty stale, only finding relief through the use of spells or items to disable encounters. I accept that it's the way of many classic RPGs to be unforgiving with their mechanics, but I also can't lie to you and say that it can't be tedious as all hell. Many otherwise interesting dungeons can have their atmosphere severely brought down by the incessant appearance of enemy after enemy. The bosses in this game also suffer from being extremely easy to exploit, though they undeniably have interesting designs and roles in the story. Overall, I think Shin Megami Tensei is still a solid 6 or 7 out of 10 dungeon crawler, if you can accept the fact that the combat's repetitive and flawed. It's definitely a big improvement over the previous 2 Digital Devil story games. I'd say the first half of the game is 100% worth playing for the atmosphere alone. From there, it's going to be up to you to see it through to the end. On a tier list, I'd say this game at worst is somewhere in the C range, and at its best is easily a B+. This tends to be the grade I've given most games on this channel, even some widely known stinkers like Shin Megami Tensei 9 and If. To be honest, I think every SMT game I've talked about has at least one thing that it does really well and allows me to derive some enjoyment from. If has some of the best dungeon crawling and strategic boss fights in its New Game Plus route that I've played in the series, and 9 has some very interesting world building. Where the first Shin Megami Tensei excels, as I've just said, is in its atmosphere, and if you can really latch onto that and get into it, I think you'll find it's quite alluring, even if the other mechanics are a little less polished. Regardless, Shin Megami Tensei will always be the classic that opened the floodgates for dozens of additional games, and I think it should be remembered fondly for everything it started for the franchise. Before we wrap everything up and call it a day, let's take a look at one last thing: the ports Shin Megami Tensei received. People loved this game so much, it got released on a wide variety of consoles, including the Wii and Nintendo Switch on virtual consoles. Some of the ports are nearly identical to the original game, and some look pretty different and have additional content added. Is there a best port, or are all of them about the same? Let's take a look. Starting off with a simple one, in 2001, Shin Megami Tensei was ported to the PlayStation, offering improved graphics and dungeons rendered entirely in 3D. The music was also changed up a bit too, but I have trouble calling it an upgrade because I think it sounds a bit worse than the Super Famicom, though I admit that's subjective. The biggest draw for this port is the fact that exploration is much smoother on the eyes. I've heard people say that they can't look at the first-person movement in the Super Famicom version because their eyes can adjust to the scrolling, so if you feel that way, this is the version to go to. While the dungeons might be a bit more immersive, I'm actually fond of how the original looks, so all this port comes down to is your taste in graphics and music. Also, it's in Japanese. There's currently no English patch, meaning it might be best to save this version for a second or third playthrough, unless you're confident enough in your Japanese to play through it adequately. Next up, we're going to jump back in time a bit to 1993, when Shin Megami Tensei was released on the PC Engine. This is a pretty interesting version of the game. Graphically, it looks almost exactly the same, except for some slight UI changes and a handful of animated cutscenes. There are also a handful of additional demons in this version, one of which is a level 99 Buddhist deity only attainable by fusion. In Tokyo Destinyland, there exists a mouse and a duck that are naturally supposed to be Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Kind of funny and a little weird. Now the biggest thing you're going to notice is the audio. The music has been altered a bit, and it's a mixed bag. Some tracks sound pretty bad, but others are quite good and even surpass the Super Famicom in my opinion. But aside from that, check this shit out. Yeah, some of the parts of the game have fucking voice acting. That's pretty crazy, and it sounds great too. Granted, these moments are very few and far between, but it exists, and I think that's neat. Mechanically, this version's decent. The combat's basically the same, but the exploration feels a little clunkier, like I was making myself dizzy as hell turning around these hallways. It's like something is just slightly off, like your turn speed's increased or something. Overall, I'd say it's an okay version. It has some unique bits that give it some personality at least. Just like the PlayStation version, you'll need to be familiar with the game already or know some Japanese before playing, since there's no patch available yet. The same goes for the Sega CD version of Shin Megami Tensei, released in 1994. I think this one's worth checking out just for how different it looks. The opening cutscene is voice acted and features highly improved visuals over the original. Almost every character has their own portrait now, and they've got a lot of detail. The indoor areas have been spruced up to actually look like houses or malls instead of blank corridors. The map screen is kind of a mess, but it's an interesting idea. They really doubled down on the GPS aesthetic here for better or worse. Mechanics-wise, dungeon crawling is strangely smooth. It almost feels like you're gently drifting when you walk. I don't really like this, but it's tolerable. Finally, combat feels very much the same as any other version. There are some new demons to mess around with in this version too, so you may see smooth faces as you explore. This is the version with the best visuals to me by far, and it was a lot of fun just seeing how the portraits ended up looking for different sprites. If you can manage to play this one, I definitely recommend checking it out. Now, we're going to jump forward again to 2003, where Shin Megami Tensei got a Game Boy Advance port. A lot of people really like this one. For one thing, you can play it in English, which is always a plus. This version boasts a few balancing features such as guns being less overpowered too. There are a substantial amount of additional plot elements accessible through visionary items, which can be found as you progress through the game. These items shed light on a lot of activities that take place in the background as your character advances through the story, and they really flesh out the world. There's even a demon dictionary feature where you can view information about demons you've encountered throughout the game. With all these features, you may think it sounds like the perfect version to start with, but the music sucks absolute ass. The Game Boy sure tried its best, but the soundtrack here pales in comparison to any other version. It's a fine port, but for some, the sound may be a deal breaker. Wouldn't it be pretty cool if Shin Megami Tensei had an official English release with all of the features of the Game Boy version and a soundtrack with better quality? That'd be the shit, right? Well, guess what? It did exist. On motherfucking iOS. Yeah, the one time this game was officially put out in the United States for purchase was on the Apple Store. What the fuck? It's not even there anymore, so you can't go out and buy it either. The iOS version was basically the exact same as the GBA, but with the soundtrack of the PlayStation version, fixing the one gripe I had with it. That's a really cruel twist of fate. If you still got a device with the game, it can be played, but I'm pretty sure you're out of luck otherwise. I guess that's what I get for being an American. Hopefully, one day when the stars align, this version will get re-released somehow, or at the very least, the original will have a translation officially slapped onto it. But for now, we're just gonna have to wait and see. So, where should you start? Well, honestly, I think the Super Famicom's your best bet, unless those extra GBA features are really enticing to you. Those two would be the best if you ask me. You can't go wrong with either. If you can't get enough of the game and want to delve into some deeper, more obscure territory, the PC Engine and Sega CD have some oddities of their own, and of course, you can always choose to play the game in 3D on the PlayStation. With that, we're finally at the end of one of the longest journeys I've ever taken for a video game. It's taken me like a year to complete this video, so hopefully you guys learned something and it was all worth it. If you watched the video all the way to the end, I really appreciate it. That's some impressive dedication. It's been a great time, and I'm always happy to try and bring these games to a wider audience. Let me know how your experience with the game was in the comments. I'd love to see it, and be sure you give it a try for yourself if you haven't. This has been the Shin Megami Tensei experience, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.